All right, two things as we get going. First of all, I wanted to make you aware of this. Next Thursday, either once a semester or once a year, right across the hall from us, there's an Enterprise car place in there. They have a free barbecue, where last year it was hot dogs and brats. And from 11 to 1, it's free food. So what we'll do is next week, no matter what we're doing on Thursday at 11, I'll let you walk downstairs. All right? And you can bring it up here. The only thing I ask is don't eat over the keyboards that are Rankins. All right? You want to eat over your own keyboard, that's none of my business. All right, so we will do that. I just gave you out a handout that if you look at it, if we ran it, it looks like this. And the reason that I'm doing that is before we go into Chapter 4, which we're going to do, I'm going to sit there and start to monkey around with this. All right? So in other words, I'm going to go over to what I just gave you, so you've got it. And the first thing to notice, if you look here, is this. Normalized Dot Css. What the heck is that? Well, if I go out here and I type in Normalized Dot Css, it's going to come back and say, make browsers render all elements more consistently. And you tell it to download it. This is the actual file that's normalized.css. You can actually go and download it. The idea is what it is supposed to do is turn off all margins, all borders, everything. So you can set every single thing on the web page yourselves using CSS. The advantage of doing that is it should look more consistent between different types of browsers. All right, that's the advantage of doing it. So the first thing that we're doing in there is we are bringing in that. Well, I don't actually have that right now. I'm going to do a Control-A to copy, or to highlight all of it, a Control-C to copy. Then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to paste it right there, and I'm going to say save. Now I've created a folder right here called CSS example, and I'm going to put it in there as Normalize.css. All right. So notice I've got all that stuff in there. Let's look and see if this looks any different. Now it's actually going to apply the normalized file. So I'm going to reload and see if this changes. It says your file was not found. Oh, okay. It's because I moved it. Desktops, it's CSS examples. All right. And it may not look much different, but what we have done is we've brought in that normalized file. All right. Now, the reason I want to mention this to you too is sometimes you'll see this. One of the people who was around when CSS was first invented, so to speak, one of the biggest people in CSS land, if there is such a thing, is a gentleman named Eric Meyer. And he's created his own file that's called CSS Reset. And it looks very similar to the stuff that you just saw, but it's a lot smaller. So a lot of people will include that file instead of the normalize. It's not quite as strong because it doesn't do nearly as much. But if you want more about it, all right, you can go out to meyerweb.com and there's an article, CSS Tools, Reset CSS. All right. Now, I want to go back into here and I want to start making some changes. What do I mean? I want to start adding some CSS. So I'm going to come in here and everything I add should be in my file main.css. Now, the reason I decided to leave it like this is normally I call my folder CSS. So normally this would say CSS and this would say style.css. That's the way I was taught to do it. That's the way most people do it. However, when we go in and start working on the project for this book, that's how they do it. They have a folder, instead of having it called CSS, theirs is called styles. I don't know why. But I'm going to come in here and it'll be CSS. And I will make one, and I'll call it style. All right, so there, I've got that. But when I look in here, well, I've got normalized, but I don't have one that's called style. I'll go back and look at it in a second. So I'll come in here, put in a new text document, just change that to style.css. Yes, I want to change it. Boom, that's been changed. All right, well, let's go back and check. You're right, that one is wrong. That should be under CSS as well. Thank you. All right, now I've got if I actually want to make changes, my normalize I'm not going to change. That's one and done. But I'm going to open here in my CSS, I'm going to open up my style file, which, as I think you'd agree, is empty. All right. Now, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say body. And I'm going to say background, green, color, gold. Just those. I'm going to save. Now I'm going to go back to my document. Is it pretty obvious what I just did? All right. I just put in what's referred to as a CSS selector. I have said body, which means unless you're told otherwise for the entire document, this is a property. So the background property, this is a value. So I want the property to be changed to that value. Does that, I'll take your question, but does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, for lack of better words, you can look at it that way, yeah. Now, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I've got paragraphs in here. So let's say for all paragraphs. And I'm going to reverse these. So I'm saying for any paragraph text, I want the background to be gold, and I want the foreground or the text color to be green. All right? So now I come in here, and boom, and I refresh. Again, is it pretty obvious what we just did? All right? It's also showing you this says do this for everything unless I overwrite it. And I just did. Now, what if I come in here and I think in here, I think we've got an ordered list. I'll have to change that. And I'm going to say now I want the background to be, let's say, orange. And the color, in fact, let's make the color, we'll make that orange. Halloween's coming up. And we'll make this black. What was that? All right. And now, oh, maybe I didn't have any in there. Okay, so we'll change that. We'll make that our aside. Okay, so you can see what I'm starting to do. Yes?
So if you would put the P before the body, would the body overwrite?
No. Because body basically says, no, let me make sure I'm answering your question. So okay, tell me if I am or not. There's an actual natural order you're supposed to put this stuff in. So you put body at the top. All right? That's the way you're supposed to do it. If you said P, then you said body, we can try it. I don't know exactly what it would do. Let's find out. Didn't change anything. Now, what a lot of developers will do is, for example, let's go down to the footer that was at the bottom. And let's say for the footer, what am I going to change? I can change anything I want, but I'm going to say font size small. It usually is small, not small caps, just small. And let's say here, I don't know, font weight bold. Okay, so that's for the footer. Save, come back here, bring this up again. There's the footer down there. Hopefully you noticed it got smaller. All right. I didn't change the coloring. All right. And Abby had asked about this, but this is one place where quite often you're going to say text align center. And you'll notice that as soon as I do that, notice where the text is now. Notice where it is when I refresh. Now, every one of these that I've been doing so far has been on an element basis. It's all been on an element. All right. Well, if you look in here, so we've got, there's a main section paragraph, there's another main section paragraph, etc. There's an aside paragraph. All right. Well, we already did our aside before. We did our aside, and you already saw this. Our aside was black with orange. You already saw this. All right, but I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to start being, for lack of better words here, more granular. And what do I mean? What I'm going to say is after my aside, I'm going to say my aside. So any paragraph that's in an aside, all right, I want that. We'll say, I don't know, font size, we'll make it big, 3M, font, family, cursive. And we'll add sans serif. And just make it a little bit different, we'll also say color, pink. All right, and one more thing, we'll put font weight bold just so it sticks out. So this is just paragraphs inside of an aside. All right. So now we're being more granular. What we're saying is P's must live inside of an aside for you to change that. All right. That's what this chapter is all about. Now I'm going to add a couple more things, then we'll go ahead and jump into chapter 4. So I'm going to say, okay, here I'm going to grab this. We've got two paragraphs here, right? There's a main section paragraph 1 and a main section paragraph 2. Now I'm going to give it a crummy name, but I'm going to say here ID equals main section paragraph 1. So I'm just going to call it MSP1. Now when I do that and run this, it looks no different because I haven't applied anything to it yet. All right, so I've got to come in and apply that. So I'll come into here and I'll say £, because it's an ID, MSP1, and we will just change something. We will say the, I don't know, font, family, cursive, font, weight, bold, color, green. All right. So we come in there. We've done all that. We come back into here. So what should change is the stuff that's in here. Let's see if it does. And you see that it does. All right. That's using an ID. On the other hand, if I come in and instead of making that an ID, I make that a class. All right, so now it's a class. Well, the first thing is I've got to go back here and change this to class. All right. The second thing is I can now come in, since it's a class, and put it in multiple places. So it's on both the block quote and it's on my first paragraph. So let's look. Again, if you look here, nothing special about the block quote right now, but when I refresh, I made it green. It's a green background with green text, which was stupid, but you get the idea. All right. So if I come back again, let's change that, the color green. Let's make it, not there, MSP one right there. Let's make it brown. Hopefully that'll bring it back. And there it is. And again, you can see for my eyes at least, brown on the green background looks almost red. All right. But what I've quickly shown you are the major components of using CSS. And I gave you that. You don't have to do anything with it, but you could see what I'm working with. If you want to type that in yourselves, you can. You don't have to. But you can play around with it, because that's all I'm doing. That's how you learn how to use this stuff. All right? And again, yeah, going back to what had been asked earlier, if I wanted to, all right, let's assume this whole main that's in here, all right, that it's olden times. So I said div ID equal wrapper, all right, and now I'm going to grab everything that's in here, that's inside of here, everything before my footer, tab it over one, then end my div. Now if I do want to, I can come in here and I can say ID wrapper, all right, and I can say, I don't know, line height, I don't know, 1.2 ems. I don't know if that's going to change anything or not, but just so you get the idea. All right, and I refresh, and it changed the line height for everything that was inside of there. All right, now, some of it looks really, really bad, so we'd have to adjust it. That's not the point. All right? Yes?
So if you just wanted to adjust the bottom text, how would you go over that? If you wanted to leave the top at 1.2.
All right, so the question was, how would I adjust just this text right here? I think that's your question, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back. So this is my aside text. And if you remember, so that's the paragraph that's inside of there. And I think previously we came in and we had an aside paragraph right there. So let's change that to line height, height, and let's make that 0.5 ems. Okay? And let's see if that changes anything. All right, made it worse. Aside paragraph. Oh, it's because I got here font size. That's what's screwing it up in here. All right, let's knock that back down to like 1 em, and then hopefully it'll look a little. Hopefully it'll look a little bit more normal. All right, but you can do weird stuff. I'm asking you this question: do you normally see web pages that have a lot of different foreground and background colors in it like this? I don't, unless they're teaching sites. You typically want to shoot for something that's going to be consistent in color. All right. All right, so as we go through this, I just did that kind of just to get us started. But if there's something in here that doesn't make sense, you got to stop and ask me. All right. So that was your intro to CSS. Then it says how to specify measurements and color. Please listen to that, because when we get into a later chapter, I think is it chapter 6? Not sure. No, but it's a later chapter. Now I got to find what it is just to satisfy myself here. Chapter 8 will be on responsive web design. Then we're going to talk about different kinds of measurements, pixels and points versus ems and percentages. All right. Okay, how to code selectors. That's what I was already showing you. How to work with cascading style sheets, how to work with text, and then finally they're going to take that thing that we looked at the end of the last paragraph and they're going to actually apply CSS to it. So it starts looking more professional. All right, you've seen this already, but there are 3 different ways to apply CSS. Typically, the first way, what you see for the wordage on here is inline. And again, I gave you that example. Instead of once upon a time, you'd say something like that, where you put a big O in. If you just have to change a character or something, you can put it right in line, right in the code itself. That's considered poor programming practice because you are putting CSS right into your HTML. Okay? But if it's a one-time shot, maybe it's worth doing that. All right, so that's the first one. And that's very simply, that's inline. All right? The second way that you can do this, so I always say inline is basically on an element basis. Whether the element is a paragraph or a sentence or a word or a letter or an image or whatever. Then you've got internal. All right, and that's on a page basis. That's when you use those style tags. What section do the style tags go in? The head, if you use those. That'll apply just for that page. So if you've got a multiple page website and you want just one page to look different, you can do that. Then you've got external. And I always say site basis, because unless told otherwise, that'll apply to every page. That one is when you've got an external file that ends with .css. That's what I've been using for you so far. All right? And the thing to remember, there's also another one that I haven't even listed here. And that is browser defaults. We did the best we could to turn those off with that normalized file. All right? But if you don't have a normalized file and you don't have stuff listed, which will be your default, whatever the default is for that browser. So if you don't put a font family in, it'll just pick its own. All right? That kind of thing. All right. Now, when you do this, if I've got all three of these on a website, so if I've got a page with inline, if I've got a page with internal, and I've got a page with external, this stuff is done first, then this, then this. All right? And it has to be that way. If you did external first, it would overwrite all the other stuff. All right? So what I'm telling you is if I come in here into that site, that kind of garbagey site that I just mocked up for you, so if I come in here and I say, so I come in here and I say style, and I'm going to put in my own style here that's just going to call PA. It doesn't mean anything. I'm going to use it for when I'm working with paragraphs, okay? I should mention too, while I'm doing this, I'm going to have to go back, and most of the rest of the lectures I've given this week, somehow I'm in the middle of a lecture, and my afternoon lecture, sound comes into your lecture. I've never had that happen before. But believe me, you're not going to be able, it's bad enough to hear me once. You're hearing me in stereo, and I'm doing two different lectures. All right, so I'm going to have to go back and change those. I don't know what I did wrong, but it was something. So I come through here with PA, all right, and let's just say here, I'm just going to make something simple. I don't know. No, I don't want to use with. Let's just say, we'll say font, style, italic. All right, so there. All right. Now, okay, so I've got font, style, italic. You all see that. So we've got here what? We've got this class, and you know how that was set up, but I'm going to also say ID equals PA. Did I make that an ID? I don't remember what I did with it. I think I just said PA, which isn't, you should never do. So pound PA. All right. So now I've got ID equal PA. Now we come back to here. I'll take your question in a second. If I screwed up, I'm taking for granted you'll let me know. All right. No, I did screw up. So, thank you. Yep, that'll do it. All right, but you may or may not be able to tell the paragraph that I put it in is now italicized. So that's combining them on a page. All right, and if I wanted to say here where it says main section, okay, I could if I really wanted to. All right, I could come in here. I'll probably put the wrong syntax in, but I'm not going to. If I do, it's not because I'm trying to. Let's go into here, and we'll say span style equal font size 4Ms. All right, main in my span. All right. If I screwed up, you're going to know very fast. So I got to end. Let's see, spawn. I got to end that. So let's see if that did anything. Okay, is that pretty obvious what I just did? The word main, see how big it is? So that is a web page that has internal that I just applied to the one word. It has, I'm sorry, that's inline that I applied just to the one word. Internal that I applied just to the page, and external. All right. So right now, anything that I put on this page, either in style tags or in here, would not apply if I made another page. But if I made another page for this site and I put these in, all that stuff would apply. Yes. The worst way that's considered to do it is inline. It's not as bad, and I think I mentioned the other day that a lot of times if people do internal, if you've got a website that's an e-commerce site where you're selling something and you've got an error page, you might want that page to look totally different than the rest of your site so that they know. Then it's considered to be fine to do something like that. Other than that, I mean, you know, I say this and it's not meant to be funny or whatever. There are no web design police that are going to come out there, and if you do it like that, that they're going to, you know, people may or may not come to your site if they're turned off by something, you know, but that'll be about it. All right. So let's see. So I explained the three types of styles to you. 2 ways to provide for browser compatibility. That first is that normalize. Now notice it says here, what does normalize do? It makes minor adjustments to browser defaults. It sets the default font family to a sans serif. So it does a few things for you. It's considered good practice to either put in normalize or a CSS reset, because then you as a web developer are taking total control of the site yourselves. All right? Again, if you don't do it, there's nobody that's going to come out and scream at you or do whatever. All right? But I'm just telling you that it's considered best practice to do that. All right. Measurements. I mentioned these before. The main 4 or 5 are shown here. Pixels, points, ems, rems, and percentages. All right? The bottom 3 are considered to be relative units of measure. That means they will do the best they can to scale themselves so that they will look right if you're on a phone as opposed to if you're on a laptop as opposed to a tablet, etc. The top 2, pixels and points, are not relative. They're absolute units of measure. The trend today is to use those as little as possible. A quick thing to keep in mind, you don't have to write it down, but it's one you should remember. With M's, 1 M is equal to 16 pixels. So if I say 2 M's, it's like saying 32 pixels. All right, but it scales. And then notice there's rems, where 1 rem is equal to the font size of the root element. Not, you know, but where it says it's equal. I don't use rems very often. Go ahead and take a look at it. All right, if you want to or if you get the time. But they show you examples of what you can do and how it will look. I will tell you that one of the reasons you may like this book, you may hate it, but one of the reasons we chose to go with this book is they have so many code examples in there like that. Plus, if you go, yeah, but I can't type them in, they're all available under Muroc's website. In fact, the student stuff, I think I put it out there. I think it's out there under Inside Rankin. I'll try to look before next class and make sure. But it's all out there. So you can play around with that too if you want to. All right. 16 descriptive color names. 3 ways to do colors. You've seen all of them in here. You've seen using the name. You've seen using RGB. All right. And you've seen using the hex value. Okay. There's also, with RGB, you can use A, which is the amount of alpha, which is basically how transparent or how opaque you want it to be. All right? And they show you some examples in here. Again, I mentioned this to you before. 10% of the world, it's estimated, is colorblind. So remember, if you make your background color too close to your foreground color, so if your background and your text are too close, it'll be hard for those people who are colorblind to read. If they can't read it, they're not going to stay at your site. If you're selling something, they're going to a competitor. Right? Oh, come on. Again, I mentioned to you RGBA, and I talked a little bit the other day about HSL, hue, whatever it is, and saturation and light. All right? There are other ways that you can do it. They explain in much depth and breadth of coverage in here what it's about. Okay? All right, so how to code selectors. This is where we started here. Again, if you want to say, I want my entire site to look like this, you can use the asterisk. That goes above even body, Chris, when you'd asked that before. Now, is that used? Not real often, but there may be a reason to use it. All right? Then you typically have body and you work your way down. All right? Now, one thing about this, and I didn't do it, and I meant to say it, forgot to. All right? Just didn't say it. But, you know, what a lot of people will do is they'll come up here and they'll say, global settings. All right? Then if they've got special stuff, they will delineate every single section, put stuff together that naturally appears to go together. And the reason I'm telling you that is not today, but in not too many weeks, we're going to come down here and we're going to say we'll have something that might look like this. And then we're going to put in here, we'll put a comment in that it will say media queries. And then we'll be putting stuff down here. What that stuff will do is it'll base it on the amount of pixels it's actually working with. All right? And that's when we get into Chapter 8, we're talking responsive. It's not mandatory that you put your media queries at the bottom, but it's standard to put your media queries at the bottom. That's what most people do. All right. Relational selectors are kind of what I showed you. There's a relationship. These are all LIs that are under main. So if main does not include your header, if main does not include your footer, then any LIs in your header or footer will not be affected by this. Does that make sense? All right, there is a relationship. Why they're referred to as relational. All right? And there's different ways that you can do this. I don't want to go through this right now because it's confusing. It really and truly is. All right? What you may want to do is just Google CSS like relational selectors, and there's a lot of good articles out there. All right, but I think for now at least, I don't want to go into too much depth because I don't want to confuse you. All right. Now you look at some of this stuff and it's like, what the heck? I don't understand what this means. Look at this line that's right here. Well, I guess it's not letting me put it in blue. You see this line that says input type equals submit? What that is, what we'll be getting to in a later chapter when you learn how to create forms, so your contact page will actually have a form in it, you'll have a submit button in there. So when you click it, it'll submit the form. That says for a submit button, give it a border, give it this color, give it that background color. But only for a submit button. Okay? If I wanted to do, let's say I have a reset button in here, I could put input type equals submit, comma, input type equal reset, and then it would apply to both of those. Right? What we just did. All right. Now, again, this is confusing. I'm just telling you this. Notice we've got up there link, visited, active, hover, and focus. All right? And if you can't read those, it says link is a link that has not yet been visited. You know by default those are blue and they're underlined. All right? Visited, that's something that's been visited. Typically it's purple with the underline. Active, it says the active link, all right, the mouse button has been pushed down on it, but you haven't yet clicked. That's red by default. Hover is when you put your mouse over it, and focus, it says an element like a link or a form element that has the focus. It's the current one. You can change the color on any of those. Did you hear me? You can change the color on any of those. Now, notice we got link, visited, active, hover, and focus. Now, I want to make sure I'm giving it to you correctly, so let's see. There. It is, I think it's here. No, it's not there. When you put it in, you do it in that order. If you're going to list all of them, list link, then visited, then hover, then active. If you don't put it in that order, LVHA, one might overwrite the other one. All right? These aren't my rules. These are just rules. So as it says there, they should be in that order. Okay? Other stuff in here. Pseudo classes. First child, last child, only child. If I wanted to set it up so that if I had an ordered list and I wanted the first element in the ordered list maybe to be real big and the last element in the ordered list to be really small, I could use those. All right, there's a lot of uses for that, a lot more than you would think. All right, and there's other things. First letter, that would actually be the way I would do it when I showed you that big O that we talked about in Once Upon a Time. And again, they give you examples here where they change the coloring. All right, how the cascading styles work is what I showed you. Now, one thing I didn't tell you, all right, is if there's two things that compete, and somebody asked this, I don't remember who it was, the other day. So let's say that I come in here, and you already saw this. So I've got here body, green, color gold. If I come in here and I say body, white, color, black, okay, and I come back to here, still have that, to see what it changed, right? I don't know why it just changed that. Probably because I did a lot of other work in there with that, all right? But the point is, the point I'm trying to make, not well, but I'm trying to make, is this, that if I've got this, and this is more specific, it'll overwrite the thing that's more general, all right? And that's what they are getting to in here, all right? There's also something that's exclamation point important. When you use exclamation point important, when you put that in with something, do they show an example here? Probably on the next page. No. All right, do they show one here? When you do that, if you put exclamation important here, what you're saying is, I don't care what the other things are, overwrite everything and use this. The problem with exclamation point important is over time, people overuse it. And now they're putting it on everything. Then it doesn't have any meaning whatsoever. All right, so it should only be used when you really want something to stand out that it's very important type of thing. All right. Now, I showed you this the other day, but I'm going to bring it up again. So here is this kind of garbagey thing I gave you. If I hit F12 in here, now it's going to show me how everything is set up. Notice I can go to header, and it shows me that. If I click on here, I'm in my header. And it's showing me in here how everything has been set for the header. See that? Notice if I don't like that 2M, I can come in here and I can change it to 5. Whoops, not like that. I can come in here and change it. Well, there's ways of changing it. I guess maybe not that one, but some of the stuff that's in here, you can go in and manually change while it's running. All right? But if you do, it's going to be a very, very small change, and it'll only be why you've got this in there. As soon as you reload the page, it'll go away. All right? This is the Chrome Developers Tools. We'll use it a lot when we get into JavaScript because we'll use console. So if we do something like alert hello, hit enter, that's pretty obvious what that did. All right. I mean, that's a dumb example. I can use it as a cheesy calculator. 56 times 45, boom, it tells me the result. All right. But you use that because sometimes when you're working with a web page, I don't want to write it on the web page. So I want to do something, but I don't want the results to go on the web page. If I do, I can say document.write. But if I want it to show in here in this window, I can say console.log, and it'll show it in there as opposed to showing it on the web page itself. All right, so you hit F12 to turn on Chrome Developer Tools. You hit F12 again to turn it off. All right, turning up, and I'm not doing a good job of keeping up like this, but on page 147, there's the 5 generic font families: serif, sans serif, monospace, cursive, and fantasy. How do you learn about them? Well, there's examples, but you learn about them by creating a simple document and using them. Create a document, put 5 paragraphs in there, give them 5 different IDs, or set up 5 classes, and have one serif, and then you'll see the difference. All right. Font style, I've already shown you. Again, notice what it says. Slanted, which I've never used. It says it's a keyword. Oh, it's how it's slanted. Normal, which is the default, italic, and oblique. I believe oblique looks like italic, but I don't remember. All right. Font weight, you use that for bold. You can use bold, bolder, lighter, and you can use 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, and 900 for different degrees of boldness. Font variant, all right, we will get into that, but not right now. You can use, with font variants, you can make something uppercase or lowercase. Typically, that's not used as much. There's something called text transform. We'll get into that in a later chapter. All right, in line height, even though I didn't do a great job, I've already shown you. All right, a couple more properties that are in here on page 149. If you want to indent text, I showed you the align. You can also vertically align. Everything that you put in here, and this is going to be, I think it's chapter 5 or 6, we're going to talk about the CSS box model. So if I type in hello, technically, the way that it's set up on a web page, each one of these things that's in here gets put into its own box. You don't see it. I mean, they're invisible boxes. All right, but the point is, you can take anything that's in there and you can play with it. So if I wanted to vertically align this to the top, then if this is my box, that H, instead of being there, would be pushed up right against the top. If I said the E, bottom, it would be like this. All right? Now, I'm not scaling it well because I'm writing it on a board, but hopefully you get the idea. Text decoration. Anybody want to guess what this does? Or when you'd use that? That removes the underline from a hyperlink. Almost exclusively, that's what it's used for. I'm not saying there aren't other possible uses, but that's the one 99 times out of 100 that you're going to use it for. Pardon?
Is that also the way that you add?
Yes, you can also add things that way. Yes. So if I wanted, maybe when I hovered over it, I wanted the underline there, then I could say text decoration underline, and that would bring it back. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Come on, jeez. You can work with shadows. Can you see the shadow effect on both of these here? All right. There's a red shadow here. Here it's the same color shadow. And when you use a shadow, it's very easy to overuse it. It should be used for effect, but if it takes over, then sometimes your message is gone. Wow, what a cool effect. Really, what was it about? I don't know, but it was a cool effect. Okay, well, then maybe maybe you did the wrong thing, or you did too much of something. This will be a big one here. This is on page 155, and it's on floating. Okay? By default, when stuff is on a page, it takes up as much room as you give it, and it just goes on to the next line. Sometimes you want to float things. Notice the difference between the way that this picture looks and the way that this picture looks. Don't worry, they would be the same size image, but just so you see that. We're going to go over that. Floating is one of the things that sometimes drives people nuts. Just literally drives them nuts when they're working with CSS. Why the hell don't my floats work? Well, the reason I'm telling you that is somebody came up a few years ago and they invented something called Flexbox that's designed to replace floating. And if you type in Flexbox, the first article that's there, it's a complete guide to Flexbox. All right? So, not that you have to look at that, but just so you're aware of the fact that it exists. Then finally they go back and they add, notice they've changed the color of the links, these are grayed out, etc. So they've added some CSS. So they show you here both the HTML, and they always code it to show you what's changed, and then, in this case, the CSS. All right? All right. Chase has already left, and it's been a while since we've had a break, but if you would, it's 11:13, let's take just 12 minutes. We'll come back at 11:25, and then I'll explain your assignment to you. All right, the one for chapters 3 and 4. So the first one for chapter 3, you are to go in your homework folder and create an HTML page called About Me. Then you're supposed to do all this stuff in here. All right. Now notice it says use a favicon generator. I literally did go out, as you'd probably guess, and I typed in favicon generator. Boom. And it says generator for all platforms. And I don't remember that one. I think I just, for whatever reason, chose that one. All right. So it says choose file. So I'm going to go over here, shape up, images. So if I wanted one, let's say for this young lady that says smile here, I'd say that, create favicon, boom, it created it. That's all there is to it. If I want to use that, it even gives me the code I can put in. All right. So that's not difficult to do is what I'm telling you. All right. And then you do an About Me page, and it tells you how to do a bunch of stuff. When I got done with mine, mine looked like this. You're supposed to put in your name, a little bit about you, places in your life that you visit, or you visited, and then a copyright on the bottom. It's really not a difficult exercise. All right. The second one that you have to do is harder, for the one for chapter 4. So let's quickly take a look at that. All right. Download and use Normalized Dot Css. You know how to do that. All right. Then put some text, images, whatever you want on a page, and you have to do each one of these. You have to use a relative measurement. In other words, ems or percentages. You have to use an absolute measurement, pixels or points. you've got to use the hex color, you've got to use an RGB with alpha, etc. All right. So what I did, like I said, mine looks very ugly, granted. That's mine. All right. So I came in, there was a heading, and you can see I put, it's pretty ugly, but I put some shadow behind it. I took a picture, this is Jim Carrey karaokeing, and floated it to the right. Did some work with different colors. Here's another thing with some shadow on it. All right. So that's what I did. All right. And multi-font, don't worry, it's only a test. And then you're asked at the end in here to go in and use inline and embedded to demonstrate different styles. All right. So what did I do? I set it up that by default, this would be a pink background with green text. That's what I set up in my CSS file, but then I overrode it in a style tag. All right. So that's what you're supposed to do for that one. That one I'm going to let you, even if you do struggle with it a little bit, but we can talk about it later. Now, what I emailed you today, all right, it's not there, but what I emailed you today was this shape up thing. And it's got different things in it. The first thing is it's got labs in here for chapters 3 through whatever. I think the rest of your book, 3 through 19, even though we're not going to go through all 19 chapters in this book. But these will be your labs from chapter 3 on. So let's look. And I'll just go to the beginning part here. So when you get done with chapter 3, your page should look pretty much like this. The bad thing, in my humble opinion, is I don't think the instructions on here are good. All right, which could make it hard for you to understand what to do. The instructions are in here. They show you what it should look like. Then they give you instructions. Sometimes they're not, in my opinion, well written. Then in chapter 4, you go on and you make some changes. You might be able to tell. You're moving this up. There's a shadow. Colors are different here and here. So what I would like to do is I'd like to do the first 2 of those labs as a class so you can see what I think they're asking for. All right, yeah, I'll give you some more points. But what I want to show you before that, and that's why I put this up here for what we'll do next week. When you come back here, remember there's no class on Monday. But on Tuesday when you come back, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking to you about a source code management system called Git, which you may know about, which you may know nothing about. All right, and we're going to download Git as a class and do some stuff with Git and talk about Git. Why? Because when we do these exercises, we're going to use Git with them. You may or may not remember, but one of the things I had you load as a package in Atom was Git Plus. So you'll already have the ability to do all this Git stuff. You'll just have to give it the commands. All right. So we will do that between Tuesday and Wednesday. We will get done with those labs. Now, it may be that we get done with everything on Tuesday. Great. Then Wednesday is lab all period. Okay, we'll see how it goes. It's not my intention to rush through any of this stuff. All right? And then Thursday, so one of the things I'll also have to do on Wednesday is give you your test review for chapters 3 and 4. And I'll say, okay, on the chapter 3 test, what you write down, etc., that's up to you. I will give you a test review. I will let you know what's on every question of the test. All right? But, you know, like I said, how you do that, I just don't have time to write review sheets and whatever. So I'm just going to sit there and talk to you about it for 3 and 4. Then Thursday you'll take both those tests. I would guess they will take you no more than a half an hour each. Maybe they'll take longer. I don't know. All right, but I'm guessing with some of you, you'll probably get done with both of them in a half an hour. So if we do that from 8 till 9, the rest of the period will be lab on Thursday. Friday, you will come in and you will take your second test. You will be creating a brand new site. It won't be the one that you've been working with. You'll be doing a brand new site, and you'll probably be creating 3 pages. I will give you some pictures. You may have to go out and search for some pictures. And you will be, basically I will be telling you the type of HTML I expect in there, the type of CSS I expect. Does that make sense? So that's what's on tap, so to speak, for next week. All right, so we will go over that, like I said. Now, sometimes people are like, okay, I get all that, but I'd really kind of like to get ahead. Well, I'm going to put this up here, and I've only watched the first one. But I found this guy online named Corey Schaefer out on YouTube. All right, now I can run off copies if you want this, or you could type it in yourself. I've been watching his Git tutorial for beginners, and it's about a half an hour long. I've gone through the first 20 minutes. All right, then he's got a follow-up one that's called Fixing Common Mistakes and Doing Bad Commits. Don't write all this out. Go into YouTube and just type in Corey Schaefer and find his channel. All right, that'll be the fastest way to do it. But we're going to watch probably this one. This is like 30 minutes long, and I'm going to pause it while we're watching it to say, now you do this. This one I'm not going to go over with you because this will take a good hour just to do that, even though it's 30 minutes, because we'll keep stopping and doing things. All right. There are also, if you care, again, if you don't care, this is what we're going to be doing next week, but if you care, if you go out to, right there, let me put some of these, I'll make them bigger on screen so you can see what's there. All right, in fact, I'm going to make it real big. So, for example, if you go out here, https:// and you don't need that, but if you go out to right here, that is the Git homepage. So if you want to know what the heck is Git, you can go out there. All right, we will download it as a class. There is also, if you go out to the homepage, somewhere under documentation, there is a free book. This reference manual is, it's not the manual. There, Pro Git. There is a book that goes through basically everything that's Git. We won't have time. It's a 500 or 600 page book. But if you want to look at that, you can look at that. All right. Then, so there's the book. We will go into some of the guides that are out there for Git, and I'll talk about this a little bit. Then we will go out to this site that's Atlassian.com. They've got some really good stuff with Git. We'll go over that. Then we'll go over resources for learning Git. Then we'll jump into Bitbucket. All right, so hopefully by the end of the period on Monday, all of you will have downloaded Git and you'll all have a Bitbucket account. It's free. They don't send you any emails. They don't put you on some weird list. All right, I've had the Bitbucket account for a few months. I've never gotten one email from them, not one. All right. And again, this is the one, like I said, I'm 18 minutes into it that the guy has for command line fundamentals, etc. with Git. That's what we'll do on Monday. If there's any time left, we're going to start on the labs for Chapter 3 and 4. When we do them, we're going to be doing them using Git. When we get done with that, you'll have them on your system. We're going to do what's called push them. We're going to push them out to the server that holds your Bitbucket account. Then you won't have to hand me in any more homework. All right? You will have to give me, to my knowledge, you'll either have to go in there, I don't know enough about Bitbucket, I'll have to learn it over the weekend. You'll either have to give me permission to use your Bitbucket, or you'll have to give me your password. I'm hoping it gives me permission. I don't want any of your passwords. All right? But don't give those passwords out to other people, because then they can go and look at your stuff. All that makes sense? So that's what's on tap for next week. All right? All right. So if you, like I said, this is what we'll be doing. All this text, every bit of this text, this logo, every bit of this text for Chapter 3, every bit of it is all given to you. You don't have to type in any of it. All right? You just have to basically copy it in and then put tags around it. All right? So you'll have to put an image tag in for this. This is an H1. That's an H1. That's an H1. These are like H2s or 3s. This actually links to other files on the same site that they give you. These are things you're going to be building in later chapters. So all that stuff is out there. So that's what we do for chapter 3. Then for chapter 4, we start to pretty it up a little bit. So we put a shadow in here. We move this. Notice on here how these were on different lines. Then we learn how to put them on, so they're basically not on the same line, but pretty much so. All right. We go through here, and notice we're playing with colors on our links. We're playing with colors on our links. We've taken our footer and centered it. So we will do all of that stuff in chapters 3 and 4 as a class. Then my plan is, and I've got to look at 5 and 6 after we get done with that. Hopefully they're written a little better than 3 and 4 were, that when we get to 5 and 6 in a couple weeks, I can just turn you loose. And I don't have to give you any instructions or anything, that you understand what it is you're supposed to do. All right? So we've got a couple minutes left. I'm not going to go on. All right? But if you want to, I'll leave these up there for a minute. Now, it's not going to work well unless you have headphones. But like I said, if you want to, go out on YouTube, type in Corey in here, C-O-R-E-Y, I believe it is, C-O-R-E-Y, Schaefer, S-C-H-A-F-E-R, and I'm sure he's got a lot of stuff in here. So there's Get Tutorial for Beginners. It's the third one down. In fact, if I say Corey Schaefer Get, all right, it's going to give me those 2 Git tutorials. It looks like he's got even more. Using stash, different. I haven't looked at any of that stuff. I just started looking this morning. All right. So if you want, you can start looking at that. Problem is, if you turn your sound up too much, you're going to be ticking off other people. But what I would suggest is go through, if you haven't done so, if you have your book with you, you've got what, 17 minutes? Start paging through chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. See if there's anything in there that you think I did not go over, or I did not go over sufficiently, and then ask when we get here Tuesday. All right? So like I said, you got about 15 minutes left.